A lot of the injuries that we see in the industry come from the farm, and the farm just doesn't have the education that we do in the in the grain elevator type industry. So there's a lot of hazards when you go in a grain bin. So a way to avoid engulfment hazards is to understand what you're going into. The grain bin, particular the grain that was in it previously, has that grain bin been pulled out of? Is there a potential for an air void in there or any type of bridging? And when you get on top of that crust, you could fall through. So knowing if the bin's been pulled out of before, and just knowing the condition of the grain. If you have rotten grain, if if you filled the grain bin with wet corn, let's say, sometimes that peaks up more or has that potential to bridge. So being aware of the condition of the grain is very important. The best thing to do when you go into a grain bin is to have two people. The person going in it and somebody outside the grain bin watching the conditions. Before going into the grain bin, we really encourage you to wear a harness. If you do get engulfed, you can clip onto the harness and pull the whole body. Whereas if you don't have a harness, somebody's trying to pull your arm, you can pull an arm out of socket. It's just a strain on your nervous system, which is a bad deal, obviously. Obviously, if you get stuck in the grain, you want to yell as loud as you can. It's good to have a cell phone on you in your upper pocket so you can get to it. And if you're with somebody that's in a grain bin and they get stuck, don't go in after them. Call 911. As long as they're responding, keep them talking, but don't go in, because what we see in the industry is when the person goes in to try to rescue them, they usually end up either engulfed or the atmosphere is bad and they pass out. So now you have two people in there and nobody knows they're in there. So wait for the emergency crew to show up to provide that help. Also, if they're in up to their neck or over their neck, the quickest thing to do is start pulling bin sheets off, and you want to find where that level of grain is. And go to the bin sheet below it, let that corn come out to help get some relief on that person, at least get their head above it. Also, we don't want you to go in the grain bin, because if you're going into corn, the grain's going to only engulf them more. So we want to stay out of the bin until you get emergency rescue responders on site, and they'll have a grain tube. So they'll surround the person with plywood or a grain tube if they're fortunate to have those.